Hi, my name is Rebecca Lee, and I co-wrote this book, The Mercury Detoxification Manual, with Andy Cutler, PhD, who should have got the Nobel Prize for what he figured out. So it is really alienating to understand about the great poisoning and have nobody else get it. I say that it makes me feel like Cassandra. Cassandra was that poor creature during the Trojan War who was blessed by the gods in that she could tell the future, but then she got cursed and that nobody would believe her. That is what it feels like. People are just bopping along and you're like, watch out, can't you see what's happening? But nobody does. I think I had mercury symptoms for a very long time. I always felt like an outsider, which is pretty classic mercury. I thought it was because my family moved every 2 to 4 years, but in retrospect, maybe not so much. I must have started getting those damn fillings when I was quite small. And then how many of those products that must not be named did I get because of all the traveling? I can remember being quite a vigorous and feisty little girl living in Jamaica and playing with the neighbor kids all day out in nature. But after that, I think things kind of went downhill. I guess there weren't any dentists in Jamaica to do their crime against humanity magic on me. That probably started when we moved to Cambridge, when my father was getting his master's degree at Harvard, I don't know. But let me tell you one story about myself that just sounds so mercurial. My grandfather Lee, when he got back from being an Episcopal missionary in China, got the job of rector of a girls' boarding school in Southern Virginia, Chatham Hall. The upshot of this was that my sister, myself, and my cousin Kathy all went there on scholarship. It was an expensive place, and I don't for a minute not understand how lucky and privileged I was to get the education I got there. And I know, particularly now, people who are a lot smarter than me that didn't get a chance to get any education at all. But Chatham Hall, to talk about Chatham Hall had an honor system. It was very proud of its honor system. This thing was quite codified and consisted of several sections. There was the first and obvious no cheating or copying or anything like that. Then there was this thing called white flag. You were on your honor not to mess with stuff that was labeled white flag. Other girls' rooms when they were not there were white flag. That kind of thing. The buildings were old and there was an archaic sprinkler system. This was white flag too. There were lots of other white flag items I can't remember. Out of bounds was another one. You were on your honor not to leave the school or go certain places that were out of bounds. There was an elaborate point system. You got certain privileges for having good grades and keeping your points up, but you lost points for various infractions of the rules. If you broke an honor code rule, you were supposed to report yourself and you lost 1 point. If you saw someone breaking an honor code rule, you were supposed to tell them to turn themselves in. If they wouldn't, you were on your honor to report them. This whole thing was enforced by a bunch of student police people who I think were elected. I certainly was not one of them. But my cousin Kathy, who was a senior my first year there, was a president of the student council. We had a huge study hall where each of us had a desk where we kept our books and where the whole school would assemble. I was horribly homesick and cried in my bed at night and felt all lonely and weird at that first assembly where my cousin explained the honor system to us new girls. When she explained the out-of-bounds aspect of the thing, I remember my whole body being seized up with anxiety. I wondered if I had inadvertently broken this rule before I knew about it. From then on, this frigging thing tortured me, poor little waif that I was. I was always turning myself in and losing that 1 point. I suffered agonies. The sprinkler system was connected to all kinds of old pipes that ran up and down the walls. What if I touched one of them? Should I turn myself in? What if I saw someone touching one of these things? Should I tell her to turn herself in? I'd look like a fool. I sat in the balcony at chapel and there were electrical conduits on the wall. I wondered if these were covered by the pipe white flag thing. I had certainly brushed against them. You were on your honor not to go swimming if you had your period. This affected me so much that once I had to skip my gym class for 3 weeks because my period went on that long. I wondered if the ban on swimming with your period extended to peeing in the shower some way or other. Thank God you didn't have to explain yourself when you turned yourself in to get your point taken off. I remember lurking outside Mr. Yardley, the new rector's office, wanting to go in there and tell him what was happening and not daring to. I'm sure he would have told me to knock it off and forget about it, but I never went to him. I just suffered horribly for 2 whole years. By the time I was a senior, I became more popular and was considered sort of funny and eccentric person, and I was just able to get over this obsession. But for a long while there, I was sort of lurking around the periphery of that society, not belonging anywhere. Nobody else had this problem. I was all alone with it. The other girls were way more reasonable and sensible. My family was a very nice family. My parents loved each other and they loved us too. We were not mistreated or messed with psychologically. Aside from that thing about moving every 2 years, I can't think of any reason I would have been so batshit other than that I was poisoned from the mercury in my teeth and all those travel products that must not be named. In retrospect, I cannot find an explanation for what I went through other than it was a manifestation of mercury poisoning. That, in my mind, is exactly what mercury poisoning looks like. At least it was that for me. Years later, I had this epiphany about my brother-in-law, the psychiatrist's customer base. Geez, I bet 50% have mercury. I asked Andy Cutler about it, and he thought it was more like 90%. Now, who's going to believe that? Yet I believe it is true from the very core of my being, and that is why I feel like Cassandra.